All right, good morning, everyone. Does this officially call the meeting to order now then, Sophia? Cool. We'll call the meeting order now. Thanks everybody for joining. So we'll just go ahead and kick it off and have the approval of our last meeting minutes from, let me see, was that from December? November?
December.
Okay, I'm took now. Sorry, I wanted to make sure. Yes, December 14th. Did anyone want to make a motion for that?
So moved.
Awesome. Anyone second?
John will second.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And so that motion is passed. And then we have next on our agenda wanted to appoint a new committee co-chair.
I'll give a little background on that, if you don't mind. And sorry, echoing. I don't know if...
On my end?
No, do I sound like I'm echoing? If not, I'll just keep talking.
You sound fine from my Sophia.
Okay, then it's on my end and I'll just ignore it. So for folks that maybe don't know, Mike Steinhauser, our other committee co-chair, sold his building in Robbinsdale and is focused on other parts of the city right now. So we just have Felicia chairing the committee, and while she probably could do it all by herself, just in case there's ever conflicts in her world, having a co-chair that can step in and help her out where needed would be super awesome. So if there's anybody that would be interested in co-chairing with her, we don't have to decide now, but if there is somebody that is interested, please express said interest. Otherwise, we can follow up an email afterwards.
Our co-chair meetings are fun.
We don't bite.
Hopefully there'll be some follow-up emails if folks are still kind of thinking about it. And I'd like to offer for if wanted to check back in with me a little bit about the role and kind of what it looks like in real life, please just hit me up.
We can follow up an email with the committee to see if others are interested, but luckily we have a very wonderful co-chair that is holding down the fort. And I'm gonna, if we're ready to go on to the next agenda item, I will share the PowerPoint. Give me a second. Okay, I gotta get the chat back up. Can everybody see that okay? Cool. So Dan and I are going to walk through a little bit of what we heard from the community, as well as what we heard from our city partners, and kind of how we are pulling that in to the final report. So to just kind of kick us off, the comment period was from December through January 5th, and we got comments through a lot of various sources. So folks using our comment form, just emailing me directly, the cities sent letters as well. And we also got a bunch of comments on the interactive map. I would just like to give a shout out to the cohort right now about the comments on the interactive map, because that has been a source that that group of folks have really pushed people to comment on, and so we really appreciate that. I think we've driven people got used to that source, and so we've really driven a lot of comments that way. We also got a bunch of folks out at both in-person and virtual open houses, and got not everybody that attended the open houses provided comments in the informal forums. There was also just kind of informal conversation, but 55 comments are the comments that people decided to formally write down for us. Just kind of breaking down the interactive map just a little bit to kind of show the geographic distribution of where we got comments. We got the most in the Lowry West Broadway area, but then still also a lot in the Robbinsdale area as well. So what I'm going to go through now is to talk a little bit about the overall themes, and then I'm going to talk about how we kind of sorted all of the comments that we received into the various project goals, and just give a little bit of a snapshot of how those kind of themed up. In your committee packets, we sent all of the comments received. So if you are so interested in reading every single one, please feel free. And so I'm going to go through the public comments, and I'm going to turn it over to Dan to go through the agency comments in a high-level summary. So some of the overall themes are just, efficient transit, selecting routes that serve destinations, thinking about other investments. We got a whole set of questions around, just the kind of supportive infrastructure that comes with LRT. We really encourage people, your comment doesn't need to be long. It can be just, short if you want. And so we also just got, some one-sentence comments that, expressed support or opposition, or, longer things to that extent, but a little bit about it. And then there's a whole set that just kind of folks ask for specific additional information. Kind of a little bit about how overall the comments broke up into kind of categories. So about 17% are kind of the minimize the impact. So talking about a various impact that people were concerned about and asking us to look into it. The 14%, that's kind of the supportive infrastructure, right? So if you're doing this project, you also need to do this, or if you're doing this project, you also need to think about this. About 29% really were about what this line serves and why. The efficiency of transit, about 7% was just, hey, I want more information about this thing. And then you had just your general support or opposition. Kind of going into that a little bit. So goal 1, which was to improve transit access and connections to jobs. We heard a bunch about needing to connect to other transit routes and making that a connected piece. In Area 1 in Brooklyn Park, folks talked about park and rides being walkable. In Crystal, we heard some comments about just traffic and wanting to know more about that. In Robbinsdale, it was how the station would serve businesses, or how access to neighborhoods would potentially change. And then mixed feedback about park and ride locations. We haven't been showing a specific park and ride location in Robbinsdale. We've just been expressing that we will have one. There's potentially multiple options of where to place that. And kind of and I won't read everything, but just to give everybody kind of a summary, for the Lowry, you got comments that sometimes, they're conflicting with each other. So, folks would say, an opportunity would be stations along Washington could potentially serve undeveloped areas along the river and spur growth, where others commented that it's currently more of a light industrial area and the I-94 presents a barrier. So, kind of looking at each of these routes and kind of going into the details of concerns or benefits that folks saw. On West Broadway, we've heard a bunch about, in terms of like the transit specific, but making sure that the roadway is pedestrian friendly and people feel safe walking to stations, and you're not getting hit by a car or something like that. And then just the connection to businesses and destinations. So we're thinking about improving transit access. Those are the types of things that we heard along that front. And Felicia, if folks want to jump in at any of these goals to add things that they think are important, I would just encourage the committee to do so, but I will stop at the end as well.
Yeah, I just to quickly add, in the West Broadway opportunities, a lot of folks really saw this as opportunity for investment in a place where there has historically not been. And so there really are a lot of folks, we hear that this is an opportunity for that. They are excited about the investments, the improvements that could come, the better access to the transportation system across the city. And folks really interested in this concept of North Side not being a pass-through type place, but being more a destination. So there's this almost hope of this external brand that other people are seeing the community as a place to be, which is why people say, hey, it's vibrant and culture. It's actually really worth being here. It's actually worth investing. I just wanted to elevate, like that was an excite that a lot of neighbors expressed about the possibilities of the community having investments that we've wanted for a while, particularly in infrastructure on the corridor. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And again, as we're going through these, please, many of you have wonderful perspectives to add, or all of you. So please jump in and add them to what we've been hearing. So kind of going to goal 2, and the improved frequency and reliability of transit service in the corridor. So the elevated tracks options kind of came up a couple times, just because folks were saying that might help with reliability. We heard about how the LRT needs to work well with traffic. Folks wanted, for example, in Crystal, we got a couple comments about wanting to make sure that they could get into downtown efficiently. And then in Robbinsdale, both concern about could it hurt emergency response or things like that, but also then being supportive of the potential transit investment and what that could mean for Robbinsdale residents. On Lowry, there's the opportunities of folks thinking that maybe there'll be less congestion if people are getting on the train, improved service from buses, but then also concerns about, well, could it actually make traffic worse, or and people calling out specific streets like 10th Street and expressing concerns. West Broadway, you had folks talking about the efficiency of the route, both within the community and to get from the community different places. And traffic again was a theme through all of these when you talked about the efficiency and reliability of transit service. Going to goal 3, and this is this is kind of the same through all out. This is the one really about being cost competitive and economically viable. And so this is the comment that we grouped a lot of our comments of folks writing in about, well, LRT isn't a good use of taxpayer dollars. We always hear that as a theme in our work throughout all these projects, and so that's definitely something that comes out. So we definitely heard that in this comment period. That's not surprising. And a little bit too about, well, if you're already spending money on roadways, if you're respending that money was also something that kind of came up, and they were almost the same through all. For Lowry West Broadway, those roadways haven't necessarily been reconstructed as recently, and so more of the comment was, is it a good use of public funds to completely redo a roadway? So I take goal 3 of where most of the opposition comments fit in terms of that percentage. Going to goal 4, and this is the support communities development goals. I think this is the goal where this committee has in the past provided the most feedback about, and so would really want to make sure we're capturing your sentiments and about this topic in particular. And we didn't get from the public as many comments from the Crystal Robbinsdale area. We did in the Brooklyn Park and Minneapolis area. So in Brooklyn Park, it was being supportive of TOD and of those opportunities. And on the West Broadway and Lowry option, so folks talked about on Lowry about the desire to build up those business nodes and what kind of options you could see, and then mentioning vacant land and could that be more of an opportunity for affordable more housing and also just affordable housing in general. And the, West Broadway, we've continued to hear about its importance as a major commercial corridor. Also, the desire for additional residential and business development. And I think the theme that has consistently come through is that all of that happens supports the community itself. I know I've talked to many of you about, development in the community could be done right or it could be done wrong. And a lot of folks on this call are actually doing said development, right? Are spurring efforts. And so, really want to hear from you of your lens through this so that we're capturing those comments. So when we get to the discussion point, please feel free to add, but it's been a big thing through all. Been talking a lot, try to encourage you all to add as well. So goal 5 is about promoting healthy communities and sound environmental practices. This is where we kind of, some of the comments about how our infrastructure could support communities and look pretty or reflect the character and culture of a neighborhood, we felt kind of fit in here because we're talking about like community health. Again, we got a whole bunch of supportive infrastructure comments. The ability for communities to walk or bike or access the stations kind of fit into these, and that were some of the overall themes. And kind of the Brooklyn Park, and those carried through into very specific locations. So heard about that in Brooklyn Park. That came through in the Robbinsdale and wanting potentially pedestrian bridges. And then again, also in Crystal, with wanting to think about that connection to the station and how that feels. For Kevin, we got a few comments about making sure we're fully considering your hospital and any impacts that the train could bring. And the Lowry West Broadway area, similar comments coming through, right? So when we think about what a healthy community looks like, the pedestrian environment shown through and in our comments related to this goal.
Pardon me, Sophia. Can I also add on the West Broadway side? Well, even Lowry, a lot of folks in North really think of it community-wide versus just a door. So it's really hard for a lot of folks in the community to just kind of divide it as if we're only caring of one spot. But I did want to say there's definitely through to a few kind of engagement places, particularly around environmental justice and environmental concerns. And so people are concerned about how having a light rail coming through the neighborhood shift the air quality, noise quality. That's actually come up, and CT might even mention that's come up in the anti-displacement work group interview a couple of times about what the sound might be, how it might change that. And folks do the opportunity again for investments in green infrastructure. People are there are folks super interested in even just kind of collaborating in that space with the project team around what it would look like, bring about some green infrastructure, more energy efficiency, and again, that excitement around, wow, we can get sites that work, and maybe we can get some are solar powered, and maybe we could, do these different things with greens on the corridor now. So I did want to elevate those as well.
Thank you for doing that. And I think that is an area in terms of green infrastructure that is one of those items where we don't have all the details yet because we haven't gotten to that point of design, but the project team could think about how we discuss those potential opportunities with this project in a final report. Especially because, as I think Dan would probably mention, is a strong part of the county's goal. So I just know Dan wants to speak, so I'll turn it over to him.
Well, yeah, thanks, Sophia. Felicia, that's a good point because I just actually sat in yesterday at kind of our working team meeting for the county's climate action plan, and we talked about a number of different things, all the way from, is there potential space to build in stormwater improvements and potentially tree improvements for additional, not only additional greening, but also additional air quality impacts along. We've talked a little bit about solar power and how we could potentially use that in various areas, especially at station areas along the light rail, maybe. And then we also talked a little bit about, could there be spots in any of the communities where if there's some surplus property that's available, could we even put in, say, urban gardens or urban farming areas to help with food as well? Robbinsdale is a perfect example where Robbinsdale shows itself as a true heat island where in the downtown area, if building light rail means we lose some green infrastructure, how do we build back in various areas some of the similar tree plantings and tree canopies and areas like that where we can make that happen? So this is a pretty big deal in terms of goal 5, and I think it branches out into this whole idea of building a light rail project in and of itself. A transit improvement can be environmentally positive, but what other things can we build in adjacent to and as part of a capital project like this to help advance some of those goals? And so I think between state goals and county goals and Met Council goals and just working with all of the municipalities and the community, we'll get some things in there that'll hopefully improve those areas.
Thank you for that discussion. I think it's one that speaks to my heart as well when I think about doing this project. I'll close out with goal 6, and then I'll kind of sit awkwardly in silence to let the committee think about what else they want to add. And the last goal is, advancing local and regional equity and working towards reducing racial disparities. One of the things that we heard kind of through the comments is, and kind of put it in overall, even though it's kind of specific to Minneapolis, was we had a few, some comments along the lines of, well, you should invest in both routes. What does transit look like on the route that's not selected? And overall, the displacement conversation and kind of the work that C. Terrence is going to be leading the anti-displacement efforts, but just really highlighting that and making sure that that work is tied into that goal. I think people noted really that what comes out of that group is really going to determine how successful this goal was. Again, about the investment opportunities, but also really highlighting, there's parking and business impacts during construction. And I messed up with a bullet here. I'm missing a bullet. Typo. I will fix that. But kind of some of the major concerns that we've heard, kind of throughout this past year related to this goal definitely came in the comments that we just received. So Dan's going to just highlight a little bit about what we heard from the cities. But before we keep talking more, Ian, Jackson, either John, KB, Tim, Jimmy, any thoughts that you would like to share about what really needs to get highlighted in our next report related to these goals and what the community has shared with us?
This is KB. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? I think the community engagement needs to be highlighted. I think the consensus for some people in the community is that the route has already been decided and they don't really have an opinion. It's as if we're trying to convince them that this is something that they want to have. So if they're, the magnitude of the community comments and engagement, I think needs to be highlighted, and the steps that are being taken to ensure that we don't have racial disparities and displacement.
Yeah, we've definitely heard about that. You know, and you know, we'd love the discussion too. It's the project staff didn't want to feel like this route process was predetermined, right? We really wanted to. Part of why we had the engagement cohort was to really elevate community voice and to make sure that folks were coming with us as we looked into everything and tried to be transparent. But definitely, you know, an area we can continue to work on. Dan, did you want to say anything?
No, I thought those are good comments and important for us to make sure we address as we put this whole package together.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
Maybe this is naive on my part. I'm not certain how this works, but if you land on a route, my assumption is that some of the pushback has been just how the route's going to hit the highway, whether it's going to be lifted up, whether it's going to stay down. Once we land on a route, are those things still negotiable, or do we need to know that before we endorse the process? Because I think that would make a difference to people if they knew something was going to be elevated, or if they knew where the station was going to, you know, be and how it was going to be relative to the community. Those kinds of things I know they've been discussed. I just don't know how complete they are. Sorry about that. Thanks.
No, great question. And in a lot of ways, some of those details really don't need to be decided in this phase. It's kind of select a route and then go into much more heavy design to make it, you know, as best as it can be and address issues and even clear it environmentally. You know, in some cases you might, you know, want to look at a couple, you know, different options within a particular area or situation. So, but with that said, you know, in the work that Nick and his team have been doing is to really give community enough information that they know what the options are. So if you select this route, here's kind of the potential world of possibility that we would continue to refine and look further into. And, you know, kind of tackle as we move forward. So just kind of trying to disclose initial impacts and options and opportunities.
When you say freeway, do you mean, where do you mean exactly? I was just curious.
I think that
Was that for me? I don't think I said freeway, so I don't know.
I thought you said freeway.
No, I think there's maybe I did. I was thinking along 81, specifically in Robbinsdale. I know there's pushback to how it's going to line up on 81, and there's turning lanes that were going to have to be taken out, and that was some of the community angst over the value of having the light rail come through the way it did. However, if you can build it up or do something differently so it's less disruptive to the process, it might still gain broader support. That was where I was going. So 81 is not freeway. Sorry.
I might add, Kevin, that's a good question, and I might add, even in some cases, the very specifics, the less defined they are now, the better. Because if we have a route that we want to continue to explore, and that's the purpose of this, is to move a route next into the process, that leads us into the environmental mitigation piece, and so. Looking at elevated versus at grade, looking at, do we need a turn lane here or do we not need a turn lane here? We can look at that with this impact and that impact, and, you know, we can consider, you know, environmental factors, which when you think of environmental factors in an environmental assessment, it doesn't just mean, you know, air, water, and noise, but it also means property acquisition. It also means traffic impacts. It also means those kind of things as well. So we don't need, and in fact don't want to have all those things absolutely addressed right now, because we want to be able to weigh those against each other with both community feedback as well as, if we do A, it comes with this kind of mitigation. If we do B, it comes with this mitigation. And so that'll be part of the ongoing process. The thing is, you can't do that for 5 or 6 different routes. I mean, that would be too tremendously difficult. So what we've tried to do is at least get rid of fatal flaws in this initial piece, and then left on the table possibilities. One you're going to see in the city's comments up in Crystal is, what about, here's just an example, what about the Bass Lake Road Highway 81 intersection? We've looked at possibly building an interchange and putting Highway 81 through traffic over Bass Lake Road and having the station down below with pedestrian access. We've also said it could be at grade, continued widened lanes, maybe a pedestrian bridge that serves the station. Those are a couple of options. They both work. They don't have to be known today. We can carry those through and look at all the various impacts in the future. And that's part of what our ongoing work in both environmental analysis and engineering will do.
Thank you. That makes better sense to me.
This is Tim Bailey. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Tim.
Morning, Tim.
Estimates from the businesses in Robbinsdale seem to prefer the elevated route, primarily because of the access points and the turning lanes that'll be impacted with the surface grade alignment. But there's a growing sentiment also in Robbinsdale about maybe resetting and looking at going back to the drawing board and talking to Burlington Northern. I know some of us think that's an impossibility, but given I understand that there's a new administration at the railroad, and there's growing sentiment that we should maybe look at that, because going through Robbinsdale, that was the least invasive route to take. And so I just want to forewarn you that that sentiment is growing and it may be coming forth soon. So as it relates to Robbinsdale, I think that capsulizes the feedback that I've gotten from the businesses in the city.
Thanks, Tim. Yep, we're hearing that as well. So that's good to know.
Other thoughts? Those that are quiet.
I feel like I'm in my mind, the other thoughts are like, okay, if I want us to be able to make sure Robbinsdale is okay. So I really appreciate Tim raising those points, particularly for watching this who aren't like a part of this, right? So I think that context is important as people are starting to hear things happening in Robbinsdale. So I do appreciate you elevating that. I would love, if we don't know the answer now, for us to be thinking about how, if there is any ability of going to whoever the new folks are at the railroad, how does that impact the overall project? I think on everybody's mind. So I think us thinking about that and being transparent about it is going to be really important. Particularly, we start thinking about all the different communities that be connected to this line, and how perception around take time in one space to make sure everything's okay. People sometimes react to that. I think it'll be important for us, as much information we can give to the public about how that could or impact what's going on around the entire line would be important. And again, it might not be something that we lay out right now in this meeting, but something to absolutely think about in our ongoing engagement. And each of our, each in this committee's role, we're talking to folks out in our communities. So.
Lisa, that's really good, really good comments, and kind of two things with that. I think, translating across communities, what we're hearing is really important because it's one line, right? And, for example, there's themes that come up in every single city, right? Let's say pedestrian safety. We hear in every single city, similar comment, where there's also comments that are unique to various cities. And so trying to pull that forward. I'd also just want to say, for the benefit of this call, just so everybody's clear, from the perspective of the Blue Line extension, the staff that are working on this project, we are not looking at re-engaging the railroads, right? Our project is as defined on the maps that we've been sharing with everybody, and at least at the project staff level, and I would say even, our current leaderships at our agencies really recognize that now communities are with us in this process, and reversing that would be pretty damaging. And also in a lot of ways. So it's a needle to thread, and obviously it's a disappointment for a lot of folks that we had to pivot away from the railroads. But we're looking at selecting a route. Okay. I'll let Dan maybe go through his piece, and if there's any other thoughts or comments from the committee before we turn it over to see Terrence to give an update, we can have a little bit more discussion. So Dan, you ready to take it away?
I am. Go ahead. So with the packet that Sophia sent out, with all the various comments, you'll see it's like 70 pages or something like that. And there's a whole bunch of pages of individual comments that we received. But also we did receive letters from 5 municipalities, from Crystal, Robbinsdale, Brooklyn Park, Minneapolis, and Maple Grove as well. Their responses to the draft report are also included in that packet. So you can read them in their entirety. Some are letters, some are resolutions from the city councils in those cities. Each of them kind of lays out their thoughts about this piece moving forward. We tried to kind of summarize a few key points, but certainly if in your city that you represent as a business advisory committee member, or all the cities, if you're interested, you can take a look at their comments in detail and see where they're coming from, what they're thinking. Couple highlights that we put in: Brooklyn Park talks about continuing to support this new alignment and this change. They also provide some feedback about the importance of looking at pedestrian access at the 63rd station area. As you know, when we were on the railroad alignment, we had a skyway that came over the freight tracks to the station platform on the east side of Burlington Northern's tracks. Now with a station potentially in the center of 81, how that pedestrian configuration works and how that moves forward is something that we'll have to look at. Also, we purchased some additional properties up near 73rd where we build the flyover. So development opportunities there in that area is something that they highlight as well. So those are couple key factors in Brooklyn Park's response. In Crystal, they talked a little bit about what I talked about before. How are we going to deal with continuing to be concerned about how we're going to deal with vehicle mobility? Parts of the 81 that are 6 lanes today, in order to accommodate LRT, we're proposing to make 4 lanes instead. We think that fits. What the city still has some concerns. Will that work? What kind of studies ought we to do to look at to make sure that's viable, as well as wanting further investigation and input about at grade or grade separation at Bass Lake Road, both from what does that do from adjacent property impacts and development, to what does it do from pedestrian impacts, to what does it do for traffic along 81, and all of those factors. So that was a focus that was in their letter. In Robbinsdale, we talked a little bit about these before. Robbinsdale says, hey, we're kind of compared in area 2 to the Brooklyn Park Crystal area north of Highway 100. We think the final report ought to evaluate impacts and goals in Robbinsdale different than that. And so we think we agree with that, and think really Highway 100 becomes the stopping point. So 81's character kind of changes from north of Highway 100 when you're in the very north part of Robbinsdale, Crystal, and the south part of Brooklyn Park, versus when you're south of 100, where it's a 4-lane road through downtown. So evaluating those differently. Robbinsdale also says you ought to talk about in the final report what a no-build option would mean if we didn't build a project here at all. And that also tends to lend towards what Tim built a no build on 81 kind of an idea. And so that was some of Robbinsdale's feedback. Minneapolis's feedback was definitely wanting to drill down into more quantitative number issues to really help them be able to support a West Broadway versus a Lowry option. And so, of course, that's the part of the report and the part of the part of this whole alignment discussion where we're actually going to make a recommendation between two routes, which the draft report frankly says could work. And so, you know, as you look at the draft report, Lowry, Washington would work for LRT, West Broadway, and Lindale would work for LRT. But we're going to build LRT on one of those routes. So to help recommend which one is better to help get after some of that. And we're working very closely with Minneapolis on a weekly basis to help pull those factors together. And then Maple Grove, as a member of and attending the CMC, is definitely promoting some interest in how can you design this Blue Line extension project so that it doesn't preclude and potentially allows the option in the future to accommodate a spur up to Maple Grove. Where exactly, how exactly, not specific, but let's make sure that we don't preclude that ability with the design to take something that may either extend to Maple Grove or spur off to Maple Grove or allow for a kind of a connection into Maple Grove. And so that's part of their response. So we really appreciate, I mean, this was very important feedback for us from the municipalities because it's based on, you know, not only their feelings as elected and staff officials from the city, but also, you know, reflecting what they've heard in their communities from their residents and their businesses and all of the work that they've done in each of these communities, as well as the feedback that we've received as well. So this is part of our focus, and this will be, you know, the pieces that are within these letters will be used to help kind of guide the preparation of the final report as well. And more importantly, I mean, to get back to a little bit about what Kevin had asked about before, there's things in these letters that are certainly, if not determined by the final report, certainly guides for us as we continue the process about what's important and what we need to continue to take note of and continue both on the environmental analysis and engineering work to identify as we move this route process and the whole project process forward. So very important information. Thanks to the cities for this work and for this time that they've spent with us over this year to help pull this together. Sophia, I'll let you take this, and then I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
So
I have a question. I have a comment. This is Tim Baylor again, and this is my personal observation. And I would like to see the city of Minneapolis be in a more proactive role instead of a reactive role. And the timing of this process and the status of the city government at this time does not seem to be in sync. I mean, we've got a new city council in Minneapolis, we've got a new city structure. We've got some serious issues that certainly take priority over this, like public safety. And I know that there's focus not on this project from the city fathers and mothers and policymakers, but I think they need time to do that. And so if somehow we can slow this process down as relates to going through the city of Minneapolis, whether it's Lowry Avenue or Broadway Avenue, I would like the city to be more grounded and comfortable with talking amongst themselves, talking directly to the community themselves and their constituents to have more proactive and hopefully positive input. That's all I got. Don't want to be disruptive, but this is my personal opinion.
No, Tim, thanks. Thanks for those comments, Tim. They're very well noted, and they're very much in line with the current discussions that we're having, certainly weekly with City of Minneapolis staff. First of all, I want to be very clear. The City of Minneapolis staff and the City of Minneapolis CPED and Public Works groups have been extremely cooperative and extremely proactive in working with us at Hennepin County and the Met Council on this project. I want to give them a tremendous amount of positive feedback, because they really have stepped up and come to the table and been with us all the way through. That being said, they are certainly recognizing that as we come into this 2022 calendar year, things are a little different in the city of Minneapolis. How their committees are structured, how the city council and mayor's office work together. Yes, we have some new council members as well, and they are very swamped and very busy over there. They've talked to us similarly about the project office has a schedule to go forward. We think that we want to maybe need a little more time in your proposed schedule based on the things you just talked about, Tim. How can we get this proactively in front of our new policymakers? And so we're working very closely with them. We do not want to rush this past the proper decision making and proper feedback that needs to be made at the leadership level in the city of Minneapolis. So we'll work very closely with them, our county commissioners and Met Council members. When we work with them on policy level discussions, we're sharing that same information and asking them to help work with their colleagues in the city to help kind of bring this up to the surface in an area where, you're right, Tim, with public safety and many other things going on in Minneapolis, there's just a lot of fires burning that need attention. And so it's front of mind for us. We want to get it right. We want to make sure that we address the concerns of the policymakers in the city, and that'll be part of our work going forward over the next, several months here.
Okay. Just to kind of got all this feedback. What are we doing with it? How are we moving forward? What to expect from us? And so we received, we've categorized kind of two types of comments. Consistent themes from what we've heard previously. So this whole body of work over this last year, a lot of it's built on itself. And just because we've heard it before doesn't mean that we're not going to do things differently with it in the final report. And what I mean from that is that, when you get many comments on a similar theme, you want to make sure that you're highlighting that in your analysis. And then there's the comments that, folks want a little bit more. And that is where we can really sink our teeth into and make sure that we're addressing those items in this next round of reports. And in some ways that is looking at things more, or in some cases where we did analysis but didn't necessarily highlight it as much or explain it, thinking about how to do that going forward. So that second bullet is really what the staff is leaning into and focusing on in the next month or so as we get the next report together. And so they'll pull all that into the route modification report that we'll release this spring. And because the draft report didn't include a recommendation, we'll still provide 30 days for community to basically comment specifically on the recommendations that are made themselves. And then that will get us kind of to the end of the process after the close of that comment period. Pause there for any last thoughts or questions before we turn it over to see Terrence to give an update on how the anti-displacement work is going.
Can I ask a quick question? This is KB.
Okay.
Am I mistaken, or was there a letter from CPED that was attached to the packet that you sent to us?
Yes, there was a letter from the city of Minneapolis that we consider are part of the official comment period of the draft report.
Okay.
And that was included in the packet.
Yeah, KB, the letter comes from
Andrew.
the letter is signed by CPED director and Public Works director. So
Yeah, that's what I thought.
it's in there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, see Terrence, I think it's yours.
All right. Well, it's good to be with all of you again. Just coming to give y'all sort of a brief update on where we are with the anti-displacement work. I kind of generally feel like it's that below the water ice that we're building up right now, and it's kind of not reaching to the surface, but just want to make sure that y'all know generally where we are. The big thing, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail in a couple of slides. The biggest thing that we're doing right now is we're interviewing for anti-displacement working group members, principally the community members. If you remember, we're looking for generally a 21-member group made up of folks from government, folks in community, both part of organizations and not part of organizations, as well as philanthropy. So the big thing is that we're interviewing that. We're hoping to have those members set by about February 11th. Which I think we're on track to do, but I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. Generally, we're hoping for that first anti-displacement working group meeting to be in late February, but once we get all the members on board or identified, we'll sort of solidify with that date. Hoping for, February 23rd, 24th, but we'll just have to see what's available around that group. The good thing is because we're in this smaller or less number meeting schedule, we're kind of not in a crunch for time. So I think if it dips a little bit beyond that, then we'll be fine. But I think we're on track to make that happen. Just so y'all kind of generally know, I don't know if I put this out for you before, but last time we talked about going to these big Saturday meetings, full day Saturday meetings. So just generally knowing which months we're pushing towards. May be the first one. Lessons from existing blue and green line light rail as well, including the blue line extension planning. So what we've learned from before this time, we're hoping to talk about in May. In September, we're hoping to talk about housing and cultural displacement. October, business displacement. In February 2020, I should put 2023. February 2023 for finalizing the recommendations. So, again, these are the big Saturday meetings where we'll be talking about research. We'll have community experts to come in and talk about it, and then we'll really be pointing towards different policies that we can sort of learn from and potentially recommend in this context. Qualitative and quantitative research has begun. I sort of have a slide later on in the presentation to talk about exactly where we're at for that. And then we had a really good meeting. I really appreciated to Kathy, Dan, and Sophia, and Joan, who I don't think is here today. We had a great meeting as a, Kira team plus Kira team extended onto this working group extended meeting on last Friday. So I think we had some good conversations to queue up for us about overall outreach and engagement on this project, sort of merging or not merging, being in close relationship between the alignment planning and the anti-displacement working group. And so I'll talk a little bit about that too as well. So jumping to the next slide. So to this point about working alongside in community. So, broadly what we hope is obviously there's the anti-displacement working group, but there's also just a way we connect to community as a whole. And I think there's a couple different ways that we're thinking about doing that. I'm going to sort of talk about how we're already starting that research, and that's from what we proposed in our, in our initial proposal to Hennepin County Met Council, but we still want to fill out that research agenda, particularly when the anti-displacement working group comes together. But we've also been in conversation and planning on maybe some larger connections to community around making sure that research agenda is the right one. What fully capacitates y'all to make recommendations and to say yes or no to the things that are put out from the anti-displacement working group. We've thought about and we're bringing in, government folks into the anti-displacement working group itself. And so we sort of talked about that structure. But also know that, around those timelines for those big Saturday meetings are also going to be big opportunities for us to be in community to talk about, that research, to talk about what the anti-displacement working group is up to, but as well as to get feedback around each of the different items in a very similar way that we'll be asking the anti-displacement working group. So around those, that May, September, October, February timeline, you'll also see kind of in that same month and months after times where we'll be doing things like community workshops, might be having some things like open houses, community roundtables around those same issues so that folks can, folks in community have the opportunity to participate and sort of benefit from the same information. We're also thinking about those big Saturday meetings being at least partially public or fully public, but we'll sort of plan that together with the anti-displacement working group once they're on board. So I just wanted to have this slide in here because I don't want folks to think, and I want the expectation to be, that we're not just connecting to community through the anti-displacement working group, but there will be this broader connection as well too. So we're planning that, definitely looking for folks' thoughts around that. We want to be quite creative. We're already thinking about a partnership with some art-centered folks in order to even just sort of communicate the data, the complex findings in more accessible ways. And so I think we want to dream alongside y'all, and I think we have the time and the space to think about ways in which we can really exist outside of the anti-displacement working group in community about the anti-displacement work. So just want to create that expectation, set that expectation, and I expect those details to be really solidified, especially as this anti-displacement working group is identified and is onboarded as well. Going to the next slide, unless there's any questions. So on that formation of the anti-displacement working group, we can jump. So we're deep in the interviews. Really want to thank Felicia from this committee, as well as Peggy Sue Imihi Bean from the CAC, who have joined Kira staff as we're on this great adventure of interviewing about 50 folks between last week and February 11th. The good thing I can report back, I think, just we got a ton of interest in folks wanting to participate in this anti-displacement working group. I think we're just under 70 applications, pretty diverse racially, also diverse from, I think, experience. We have candidates from both organizations and not from organization. I will note that there is kind of a light representation in the city of Crystal. So I think depending on how the interviews with the folks from Crystal, we might be putting out more of another call for folks maybe distinctly from areas where we might feel underrepresented, which I also just want to make a note. If y'all still know folks who want to apply for this anti-displacement working group, who might say like, oh, I missed the deadline to do it, it's fine. Throw in an application. We'll make it work and fitting into the interview schedule. We're not closing anybody out. We just had to set a date for folks to get something so we can get this process started. But that's for all of you. I'm being particularly in the business community, business connected community. If you still have folks who might be interested in this work, get an application in. We still have it posted on Kira's website. I believe it's still posted on the My Blue Line EXT website as well, so you can find the links through both of those pages, or just send me an email and let's just make it happen. Let's get folks in here. We don't want to leave anybody left outside of this process. I think another thing, of course, everybody won't make it onto the anti-displacement working group, but what we've been committed to setting the groundwork for is for any of the folks who sort of connected this project to have some connection into this anti-displacement working group. I think we still need to be creative on exactly what that looks like. Maybe they become interview participants or focus group participants or World Cafe participants. But anybody who sort of walks through this door, I think we're finding the opportunity to make that connection and folding into this anti-displacement work as a whole. In addition to the community representatives, we're identifying philanthropic representatives. I sort of am naming our ideal foundations, and some of them, I think, one of them, say Phillips and the Minneapolis Foundation, they are just an applicant within the anti-displacement working group process as a whole, which is great. They identified themselves, but also working to identify folks at these other foundations as well to fill up those spots. And the governments too are identifying their representatives and putting together internal working groups as well. So really excited about that. All I can say, this is going to be a powerhouse group. Felicia, I don't know if you want to say anything because you've been in on the interviews, but it's gonna be tough selecting from this group. Really, truly an all-star group of people. Sheesh. Yeah. Please add.
Yeah, definitely. I've been just very impressed with super diverse sections of folks who we've been interviewing. I mean, wow, those who recruited folks, suggested folks join, thank you so much. Because yeah, I've been pretty impressed. And I definitely don't know everybody who we're interviewing, so it's been really great getting to know folks, and hear these perspectives around racial justice lens, or anti-placement, and even the way that each of them have been elevating concern thoughts from the community that they're connected to. I've found to be pretty helpful too. So yeah. I have questions. They're done though, C. Terrence. I can wait till you're done with your part and my questions too.
Right on. Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Thank you for that testimony into the quality and amazing group of candidates that we have lined up. It's been awesome. To the research plan, I just want to sort of highlight the things that are underway. So I think you've seen this slide before. In some ways, each of these items are all being queued up. Again, sort of, if you go back to the slide, and you don't have to go back to the slide actually, but if you went back and looked at the slides where we're sort of showing the Saturday meetings, you'll see how these things slide in. So, the first meeting in May, the first Saturday meeting, we're really focused on, what can we learn from the existing blue and green lines, including lessons from the planning from the Blue Line extension is the first meeting in May. So a lot of the research is focused around that. Largely quantitative, so looking at different, basically at what point did displacement really sort of intensify around the existing blue and green lines and their different development stages. A lot where we're focused right now from the quantitative front, but also reviewing, best practices in anti-displacement policy and locally and nationally. So it's what we call a literature review around the country, particularly centered around transit and oriented development. And then kind of the qualitative side is really focused on queuing up this needs assessment for investment in the corridor, which is going to be a big undertaking of interviews and focus groups and other sort of in-person connections to folks. And so we're really queuing up around that. Hired a lot of graduate research assistants, and I don't know, I'm sure Kathy and Sophia and Dan were probably like, wow, I didn't realize the team was that big over at or maybe y'all did realize it, but we've got quite a big team moving on a number of different fronts, which is just exciting. And we don't have a lot to report on that right now because we're just queuing this stuff up. But in the coming months, particularly I would expect the month before these big Saturday meetings is actually when the data is going to be ready on any of those particular items, and so that will sort of queue up our time together. When we're thinking about May, so in April we're going to be talking about the existing blue line and green line development. Well, August we're talking about housing and cultural displacement. I'm forgetting the months that are right before. Just before the month before, we'll come and talk about. That'll also give us a time to sort of talk about how to prep this information to be presented in community and to be shared as well. So look out for that. And let's see, to the next slide, I think might be the last slide. I just wanted to shout out Kathy for putting together this beautiful slide for a recent meeting. And I think it's just a good way to frame up some of the work. This was for a steering committee. Is it the Public Works Steering Committee? Am I saying that right?
Community Works Steering Committee.
Community Works Steering Committee. There's so many acronyms in my head. Community Works Steering Committee. I'm just thinking about the different goals that those committees have that sort of align with the work that we're going to be doing. So I think, just looking at expanding wealth building opportunities, creating sustainable community and vision development, increasing access to and skills and sustaining jobs, amplifying success and vibrancy of cultural and community assets. I think, like Felicia said, folks are bringing these things up, or in different words, but similar intentionality, these same sort of desired outcomes of this work. And so just sort of slotting the different ways of what we're studying, the existing LRT outcomes, residential cultural displacement, business displacement, policy, and other recommendations, how those things might support each of those different aspects. And so again, getting to that very practical point, I want to keep reifying and reaffirming what we're doing here. This isn't just a theoretical exercise, but a very practical exercise in delivering needed policy investment and programs to prevent displacement. So I'll sort of stop there. I'm sure y'all have questions. Yeah, just want to hear what y'all are thinking.
I did have questions.
Yeah.
Questions, a couple of thoughts really quick. So I wanted to know if I feel like there is opportunity right now to start talking a bit more publicly about the anti-displacement work, even this process around like interviewing folks and things like that. I just wonder a little bit if you're also kind of cueing some of that, like there almost needs to be I don't know if it needs to be a campaign ever, but I think that could be ways to publicly talk a little bit more about displacement, like outside of these meetings, and even just on the process, that timeline. And so, because I feel like county and even folks on BAC, we've been telling folks in the general community that it's happening. We're excited. This is a historical thing, and that's been happening for a few months. So just wanted to throw that out there. And I wanted to know, once the members of the work group are selected, will there be like a public announcement of that and who those folks are? I think people would be interested to know.
Yeah, great questions and insights. I really appreciate that, Felicia. So yeah, so I think we are actually developing some publishable or shareable materials about this work actually right now. I guess the reason why they haven't gone out is because we also want the dates of when to expect things on there, which we want to solidify with the anti-displacement working group. So in that I would expect by the end of February, by the end of this month, we'll have some publishable materials, just say talking about the timeline that we're on, ways of sort of communicating this is the work that we're going to be doing in ways that you can be expected to be plugged in. So we'll have some shareable materials, but I also would love to, let's be in conversation, or let's think about together, like what do y'all need in order to take, like, if you had something, is it like a one pager? Is it, just have a web page to link folks to, whatever those things that might be even in your networks would be helpful to share. Let's say it, because we can make any of those things happen, right? We have a web page that will become more, that's becoming more robust, will be more robust by the end of this month. But just let me know whatever those materials are, and I think we can make those happen.
To that, Felicia, too, I just wanted to say that we have been talking at the county about storytelling of what, some things that we did here, right? And so however that comes about, I think we could do that in the forefront here to keep people informed about, okay, this is what we did here, and here's a story around that. So we're thinking about that as well.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And speaking of that, I have some footage that was sent to me by the Small Business Revolution. So it was without going too deep into it, it was this TV show that national television focused on. One of the areas it focused on was West Broadway Avenue. And so there were comments from people in community, people on the show about the Bloom line, because it was talking about, one of our small businesses and how could that impact something so important to community. At any rate, I actually have footage of people like Dr. Brittany Lewis, community member like the late Bill Cotton, even also myself talking about project, and there were some really great insights that were pulled out of that. I need to know how to get that to you because I have it like on a hard drive. So I don't know, should I connect with Joan to figure out a way to get even that? I think that could be some helpful content as well to share in storytelling. And then I do know on the engagement side, there some of those groups had really great videos and maybe some reads of some of the work, which also included insight from folks in community. So it might be worth, again, Joan's not on the call, so I know you probably speak to this quite a bit, but she knows, and I think she might even have some of that material as well. We're looking to do some storytelling. And yes, see parents, I'd be happy to connect. Joan, I missed you. I'd be happy to connect on, so we can brainstorm, and I can probably forward you to some folks who can help make that happen.
I think Jamar and them might actually have some of those videos that you had them start on.
Yeah, Kiara was the engagement person, so I know she has some stuff.
I think they're done with it.
Okay, cool.
So I can try to touch base with Jamar later and see if I can just get him to connect with Terrence, or actually have him connect with you, Felicia. So you can get it all over.
I actually received the links to those today, and my computer, I'll see if my county computer will let me download them. So to be continued, I'm really excited about that. And I think our goal is really using my Blue Line extension website as a place for community storytelling platform, and for sure putting out, the videos received from community and other things like photographs that we've gotten from 2021 and beyond. And so I'm super excited about being able to do some storytelling with community members.
You got the ones from Jamar, Joan?
Yes, I did.
Sweet.
Yeah, thanks, KB.
Even the Blue Line Coalition might also have some stuff. I attended an event that they had last week. It was really, really great because we had folks in community sharing stories. And some of them even had like more local context around this too. So might be also a source of some info or storytelling content.
So, and just on the other question, yes, there will be an announcement or a communication about the members once that group's put together too. So I would expect that around mid-February, around that like February, probably the week after February 11th. Make sure everybody says yes and right. But then yeah, really that next week we'll have the a broad communication. I don't know. I don't know. Go through, like, should I take everybody's portrait, get their picture, people know their faces? I don't know. I think we could do something pretty cool for sure. So, yeah. Great questions. Any other questions?
Okay, folks. Well, you know where to find C. Terrence. If there's any follow up, we will continue to have him come back and give this committee updates as the work progresses, so everybody here is involved in what's going on. And kind of just to kind of close out the meeting a little bit, our next meeting would be in March. Right now, project staff is recommending probably canceling our typical March meetings, and that would be, we want the next meeting to be kind of draft report, or not draft report. I keep saying draft, even though it's not draft anymore. On the route modification report itself, we are still working on a target date for exactly when we release it, but we're pretty sure it's not March. It's probably at least April sometime. So either way, we'd want to have an April meeting, whether it's our normal meeting or a special meeting. Just, C. Terrence will have things going with the anti-displacement. Even if the report isn't fully out, we'll have some updates on kind of how it's going and maybe some additional analysis to share. But in March, the team knows we're going to be in kind of a norming, storming type path. So as of right now, if it's okay with this committee, we'd be looking to cancel March and then kind of figuring out our April date as we know our schedule a little better. If that sounds good to folks. Okay. Well, that is what we got. Thanks for joining us. Chair, any last comments for the committee?
No, not much. Thanks for joining everybody joined today. And if we're going to take that time off in March, it's a good opportunity for us to tap at any of the engaged events, or we create some for the community to tap and get some updates from us. Yeah, if there's nothing else, our meeting's adjourned.
I think so. Bye, Jennifer. Bye, John. Bye, Felicia.
Peace, y'all.
Bye, Stella. Bye, Jibby. Bye, Jackson.